"Who do you think you are walking in here like that?" Victor Hale, the HOA cop in a light-colored suit, pressed the barrel of his gun straight to my daughter's forehead like he was the king of this neighborhood. But he picked the wrong target. Naomi Carter, a Navy SEAL Special Ops trainer. One cold, dead stare was all it took to turn a power-drunk bully into a puppet. This story is a warning. Fake authority destroys the fool who holds it. Where do you live, and has your HOA ever gone this far? My daughter Naomi Carter and I walked along the path by the lake. The surface of the water reflected the morning sunlight, each small ripple gently rolling, making the whole scene feel strangely calm. A few neighbors were scattered across wooden benches, coffee cups in hand, quietly chatting in low morning voices. I had deliberately chosen this morning to take Naomi out, like a fresh start, after the long months we had lived under tension. She took a deep breath, her shoulders relaxing, eyes following a group of sparrows perched on the iron railing by the lake's edge. I knew the memories of her intense training work had never really left her, and this was the moment she needed peace more than ever. Naomi wore simple, everyday clothes, fitted brown top, dark army pants, and her hair tied neatly back. Her face was delicate yet steady. I noticed the calm sharpness in her eyes, so different from other girls her age in this neighborhood. It was the look of someone forged in places most people wouldn't dare step into. But today, it's soft, as if she was letting herself enjoy a rare, ordinary moment. I remembered clearly why I chose the house in this area. It wasn't the biggest home, but it was near the lake, where we could walk like this every morning. I thought it was simple. Life here would be peaceful, the community open, friendly. But since we moved in, the curious stares, the stiff greetings, even the hushed whispers behind our back made me feel we weren't truly welcome. I wanted to ignore it, tried to believe that time would help people understand us better. As the two of us reached the wooden bridge stretching across the lake, Naomi smiled. She pointed at the clear water, where tiny fish were swimming below. I laughed along, relieved to see her lighten up, if only for a moment. But that fragile peace was shattered almost instantly. The roar of an engine behind us made us turn. A shiny SUV with a bold HOA logo running across the side in large capital letters screeched to a halt in front of us. Tires squealed against the stone pavement, leaving behind a burnt rubber smell in the cool morning air. Before the dust had even settled, Victor Hale rushed out. His light-colored suit flared with each step. His leather shoes clacked loudly on the pavement, each strike sounding like a warning. He stopped directly in front of us, one hand ready on his belt, where the outline of a holstered gun was just visible. "You're trespassing on community property. Get out of here before I have to take stronger action." His voice was low and sharp, each word hitting my ear like a hammer. Naomi froze, her face tense for a split second. I stood still too, not out of fear, but because of the sheer shamelessness of someone pretending to have authority. I forced myself to stay calm, speaking firmly. "We live here. This is a shared amenity for all residents. No one can stop us from walking around the lake." Victor laughed, a sharp, cutting sound. He glanced around as if to make sure the people sipping coffee nearby could see exactly who the boss really was. "You think your paperwork protects you? In this neighborhood, I am the law. If I say you can, you can. If I say no, then get out." I could feel the venom in every word he threw out. His eyes scanned Naomi from head to toe, invasive and mocking. Then he squinted, lowered his voice just enough for everyone to still hear. "Dressed like that? You look like trash that wandered into a place meant for the elite." Naomi bit her lip, her hand tightening around the strap of her back. I knew she was holding herself back from firing back, but that insult was not easy to swallow. I stepped forward halfway, placing myself between them. "You have no right to insult my daughter." Victor smirked, his mouth curling into a sneer. "No right? You think you have right? People like you should feel lucky just to be allowed in. But don't fool yourself into thinking you'll be treated like the rest of us. You're not in our league." I heard whispers behind us. A few people lifted their coffee cups, glanced our way, then shook their head. No one stepped in, no one spoke up. That silence was heavier than anything Victor had just said. Naomi raised her head, her eyes bright, voice calm but razor sharp. "We haven't done anything wrong. You're twisting this into an excuse to insult us." Victor spun toward her, as if stunned that a girl dared speak back. He lowered his sunglasses, revealing a pair of icy eyes. "Girl, you better know your place. Newcomers here always think too highly of themselves. Don't think that Carter name means anything to anyone." Naomi's face flushed slightly, but her voice dropped, nearly a whisper, crossing the line. That made Victor burst out laughing. He threw his head back, the sound echoing across the lake. "The line? I draw the line, not you. You're just a little colored girl living off your dad. No one cares who you are. Don't get cocky. I clenched my fist, veins rising beneath the skin. I wanted to knock that smug face off, but Naomi's look stopped me. What I saw in her eyes wasn't fear. It was fire. My daughter wasn't trembling. She was waiting for the right moment. Victor stepped back slightly, but his voice rose, loud enough for everyone around the lake to hear. This guy and his girl think they belong here, but they don't. This is a place for people of value, not the bottom tier. Some people lowered their eyes. Others forced an awkward chuckle. No one objected. That quiet complicity made my blood boil. Victor was used to silencing people with fear and his little badge of HOA security. Naomi took half a step forward, her eyes steady, her voice clear. The louder you shout, the more you show your true face. One day, everyone will see that you're nothing but a leech on fake power. Froze for a moment, then growled, "You've got a big mouth, girl. Let's see what it takes to shut it." His hand clamped down on his belt, drawing attention to the gun holstered beneath. I took a long breath, heat rising through my body. I knew Naomi was about to step into a confrontation Victor never saw coming. And I also knew what just happened was only the beginning. Victor straightened the flap of his light-colored suit with a sharp motion, as if he had just armored himself in some invisible shield. From his pocket, he pulled out a violation notebook stamped with the dark blue HOA logo. Holding it in one hand, his voice turned cold, and he read aloud as though delivering a sentence. "Your family does not belong to the class allowed access to this lake. This is a high-value residential area, not for newcomers like you." He spoke slowly, emphasizing each word, making sure everyone around the lake could hear clearly. I caught a few glances from afar, eyes watching us with curiosity before quickly turning away. The silence stretched, broken only by the sound of wind brushing across the lake and Victor's voice dripping fake authority. I stepped forward halfway, trying to keep my voice steady. "This lake is a shared amenity. We pay full dues every month, which means we have the right to enjoy it." Victor let out a dry, mocking laugh. He tilted his chin, his gaze sweeping past me and landing on Naomi with a mix of scrutiny and contempt. "You think a few monthly dues put you on the same level as us?" His voice sliced into our dignity like a knife. I felt Naomi's hand grip mine tightly, fingers trembling, not from fear, but from fury. Naomi turned to me, her eyes glistening with pain, not from Victor's words, but from the way he looked at us, the way he treated our skin color like a license to degrade. I met her gaze and nodded slightly, silently telling her I understood. Deep inside, one question rose up bitterly. Is this still the just America I once believed in? Victor wasn't finished. He flipped open the violation notebook, skimming through pages as if searching for clauses he could twist to fit his narrative. "You want to be difficult? I can find your family right now. Trespassing in a restricted zone. Disturbing the community. Displaying hostility toward the HOA. Any of those is enough for documentation." He scribbled a few messy lines, then held up the page like it was a trophy. The blood in my body boiled. "You're abusing your authority," I said, my voice heavy. "This is not how a homeowners association is supposed to operate." Victor snapped the notebook shut, the sound of its hard cover cracking together like a warning shot. "You think you know the rules better than I do? I've been here more than 10 years. I've signed every regulation, every amendment. And you've been here less than a season. People like you and your daughter, need to learn to quiet and follow. Don't pretend you're equal." Naomi drew in a deep breath. I saw her bite her lip until it bled. Her eyes locked onto Victor's, blazing, not with the gentle look she wore that peaceful morning, but with something fierce. I knew she was swallowing every insult he threw at us, and I knew she wouldn't keep it down for long. Victor glanced toward the nearby residence. "Look," he said loudly, his voice echoing through the space. "This is the perfect example. Newcomers, no respect for the rules, think they're equal, but in reality, they're nothing but garbage ruining the landscape." A dry chuckle came from the nearest coffee table. I turned my head and saw a middle-aged man shaking his head, a cold smile on his face. He didn't say a word, but that smile was an act of complicity with. I wanted to fire back, but my throat tightened. In my mind echoed the old teaching, "Stay calm, don't let others control your emotions." But those words were hard to apply when I saw my own daughter being dragged out as a target of humiliation. Naomi spoke up, her voice not loud but clear. "You're trying to turn this place into your personal stage to indulge your fake sense of power. But the truth is, you're not worthy of being called a protector of this community." Victor paused for a beat, then squinted, crooked grin spreading across his face. "You've got a lot of nerve, girl. Who do you think you are to talk like?" Naomi didn't blink, her gaze sharp as a blade. "I'm only saying what I see, and everyone here can see you're deliberately humiliating my father because of his skin color and social status." The crowd remained silent. No one defended us, no one objected. They just stood there like shadows, witnessing everything and saying nothing. That That silence hurt more than any insult. Victor laughed again, but this time it carried a hint of rage. You don't even know who you're talking to. I don't need a reason. I am HOA security. I am the law. Anyone who opposes me pays the price. I stepped in front of Naomi, my voice low and firm. If you think you can use fake authority to trample over people, then you've picked the wrong family. Victor lowered his sunglasses, eyes glaring as if trying to burn me alive. You challenging me? Don't forget, I know how to make your life hell. 1 violation notice, 2 notices, a few resident meetings, and you'll lose your house before you know it. Naomi shook her head, her voice calm and steady. The more you talk, the more you prove you survive only by threats. You don't represent justice, you represent rot. Victor gripped the violation book tighter, his hand trembling slightly, but his voice came out sharp and harsh. That's enough. From now on, I'm putting the Carter family on special watch. Every move you make will be under my eye, and when I decide the time is right, I will have you removed from here. That sentence, spoken in the morning light, sliced through what had once seemed like peace. I felt Naomi standing close beside me, her hand resting on my shoulder, not asking for protection, but reminding me she was ready. I drew a deep breath, looked Victor straight in the eye, and deep down, I knew. From this moment forward, the confrontation could not be undone. Victor Hale no longer kept the half-hearted distance from before. He yanked the gun from his hip, metal gleaming under the sunlight, and raised it, the cold barrel aimed directly at Naomi. His voice thundered like a storm crashing down over the lake. Get on your knees. I'm the law here. Black or white, go against me and you die. I heard every word as if it were bricks pressing down on my chest. The air froze in an instant. The wind rustling through the leaves was drowned out by that looming threat. Few nearby residents froze mid-motion, coffee cups suspended in the air. Some covered their mouths to muffle gasps. Others chuckled under their breath and pulled out phones like they were watching the opening act of a show. The barrel gleamed, and Naomi's forehead lined up. Death Victor had just drawn. Felt my blood chill, my limbs weak. But one thought rang through my head with piercing clarity. My daughter was being threatened right in front of me. Naomi stood still, her eyes slightly trembling, the corners glistening, but no tears fell. She turned her face gently toward me, her eyes wet yet unwavering, her voice a whisper. Dad, don't be afraid. Her words lodged in my throat. She was the one staring down the barrel, and yet she was the one calming me. I swallowed hard and stepped partly in front of Naomi, but Victor raised the gun higher, pointing it straight at both of us. He smirked, a twisted grin part contempt, part satisfaction. This is what real justice looks like. Break the rules and you submit. You think you're special? To me, everyone's the same, and if you don't follow the rules, your ending's the same too. His words echoed around the lake, slipping into the ears of residents hiding behind the tree. No one stepped forward. I saw a few heads shake gently, but that was all. Some eyes glinted with amusement, like they were watching a high-stakes performance. They saw a man in a light-colored suit, calling himself HOA security, aiming a gun at a family that had just moved in. And in their eyes, it was entertainment. My chest heaved, my heart beat loud in my ears. I shouted, "What the hell are you doing, Victor? This isn't about the HOA anymore. This is an armed threat." Victor jerked his chin upward, his eyes gleaming with savage delight. Exactly. And you need to understand, here, the HOA holds all power. Anyone who resists gets removed, whatever it takes. You think anyone will testify against me? Look around. I turned my head and saw the averted faces, phones raised to record, but not a single voice speaking out. Victor wasn't wrong. Fear had turned them all silent. Naomi took a long breath, then suddenly stepped forward half a pace, standing tall, her eyes locked on the barrel of the gun. She didn't tremble, didn't kneel as he commanded. Her voice rang out, clear and terrifyingly calm. You believe everyone must kneel before you? You're wrong. I don't kneel to anyone who uses fear as a weapon. Victor flinched for a split second, but immediately burst out laughing, high-pitched and shrill. Fine. Let's see. I want this whole neighborhood to witness the price of defying the HOA. I want every person sitting in their house, looking through their window, to understand that the law here belongs to one man, and that man is me. His words cut through the air like a blade, making even the sound of breathing around the lake feel heavy. I saw Naomi still standing firm, her gaze radiating strength toward me. I realized that if I backed down now, I'd be teaching her that we had already lost from the beginning. Victor squinted, lowering his voice, but still loud enough for everyone nearby nearby to hear, "What are you going to do? Call the police? Who will they believe? A newcomer, brown-skinned, with no connections, or me, someone who's been part of this place for over a decade? Don't fool yourself." I clenched my fist, rage burning in my chest. But before I could respond, Naomi spoke, her voice clear and ringing. "A gun doesn't make you powerful. It only shows that you're a coward, hiding behind metal and fake authority." A murmur swept through the crowd, a few faces showing brief flashes of shock. No one had ever dared speak to Victor like that. Victor roared, "Shut your mouth!" One squeeze of this trigger, and it all ends here. The gun moved closer, the distance between life and death now measured in fractions of a second. I could hear people swallowing hard around us, the tension choking every breath. Naomi didn't move. Her eyes were sharp as steel, her hands hanging at her sides but taut, ready for something I couldn't fully grasp. In that moment, I wanted to scream, to lunge forward and shield her, but Naomi tilted her head slightly, whispering just loud enough for me to hear, "Trust me, Dad." Those words sank deep into me like nails. Standing there with a gun aimed at her, surrounded by a neighborhood frozen in silence, my daughter still believed she could stand tall. That belief made my chest tighten with both pride and fear. Victor held his stance, his finger hovering near the trigger, trembling, not from fear, but from excitement. He was drunk on the feeling of control, treating someone's life like a spectacle. Every word he spoke drained the air, as if even the oxygen was being sucked away. I watched Naomi take another breath, face unnervingly calm. The anger in her eyes was no longer wrecked. It had cooled, hardened into something sharp and controlled, like steel forged fire. I knew then, Victor thought he was the only one holding power here. He had stepped into the wrong battlefield. By the lake's edge, harsh sunlight struck the gun barrel, fracting into a blinding streak of light. In that glare, I saw clearly that Victor had gone too far, and in that same light I saw Naomi, unmoving, unbroken. My daughter, though she hadn't revealed her true identity, carried in every motion, every look, a strength he could never comprehend. In that moment, all I could hear was the pounding of my heart, echoing against my temples. I knew then, the real storm had just been set in motion. If you saw an HOA cop pointing a gun at your daughter, would you stay silent or fight back? Leave a comment. Victor didn't lower the gun. He stepped closer. The distance between the cold metal barrel and Naomi's face now no more than a breath. His voice hissed through clenched teeth, bitter and venomous. "I know your kind, crawling out from some poor neighborhood, thinking slipping into this place makes you classy." He spoke loudly on purpose, so everyone around the lake could hear. Every word he threw out sliced the air like a knife, exposing his contempt. Then he tilted his head and spat hard onto the brick path, the dry crack of it meant to intimidate. "Look at that cheap shirt she's wearing," screams Bargain Bin. "Don't think you're fooling anyone." Naomi didn't move. Her eyes stayed locked on Victor, unflinching. I saw the corner of her mouth tremble, but it wasn't fear. It was fury held back. She didn't glance down at the shirt on her body, didn't respond with motion. She just stood tall, defiant in her stare. I heard a sigh from somewhere in the distance. A few residents shook their heads and turned away. Others, still seated, curled their lips in faint smirks like they were watching a predator toy with prey. Their silence, their enjoyment, made my rage surge. I wanted to lunge forward and rip the gun from Victor's hand, but Naomi's eyes stopped. She wanted to face this herself. Victor narrowed his eyes, his voice dropping to a rasping growl. "You think you can hide your low-born roots? I see through every thread of those cheap clothes. This place isn't for parasites trying to climb into someone else's class." Naomi took a deep breath, then answered with a voice so calm it was almost chilling. "You don't see anything. You only see what you want to feed your own contempt. What you call class is nothing but a coat of paint." Victor let out a dry, high-pitched laugh. He raised the gun a little higher, the barrel now lined up square between Naomi's eyes. "You think you're clever, girl? I could end you right here, and everyone would call it just. Don't push." I clenched my fist, my jaw tight. Every word he spat slapped human dignity in the face, turning this place into a stage for his twisted ego. Naomi remained calm, her eyes steady, as if every sound he made was empty. Victor's smile twisted further. He glanced around, wanting the silent audience to witness it all. This is the perfect example. Poor, brown-skinned, stepping in where they don't belong. This community doesn't accept trash that ruins its value. The words made a few people freeze, but no one pushed back. Fear sealed their lips, even with the truth burning in front of them. Naomi lifted her head, her voice firm. "You don't represent this community. You represent the rot that's eating through it." Victor lowered his sunglasses, his eyes burning with rage and triumph. "You dare say that to me? I'll show this entire neighborhood that no one gets to disrespect me. I am the law, and I decide who stands here." Naomi didn't budge, her eyes still fixed on him. "You are not the law. You're just someone clinging to its shadow to justify stepping on others." The air thickened. Every beat of my my heart hammering like a drum. Victor's face turned red as he pushed the gun even closer, his breath hot and reeking. He growled, but that very growl exposed the agitation behind his mask of control. In Naomi's eyes, I saw a calm Victor could never understand. That composure didn't come from a lack of fear. It came from a strength he had never encountered. I knew he had just crossed a line he could never return from. Naomi exhaled, her breath audible in the tension-cloaked air. Her voice was low but steady. "Do you really want to take this that far?" It wasn't a plea. It was a warning. A voice hammered down like metal striking metal, sharp enough to jolt those standing at the lake's edge. The gun in Victor's hand trembled, just slightly, but enough for me to see it. Still, he stiffened his tone, forcing confidence into his voice. "I am the law, no exception." He hit each word like a commandment, as if trying to etch into the air that he wasn't just a man with a gun, but an untouchable force in this community. Naomi didn't drop her gaze. She stood tall, her face composed, her eyes never leaving the man holding the gun. I saw Victor glance around the lake as if seeking silent validation from the onlooker, but all he received were averted eyes, a few raised phones, and a silence that weighed heavier than any judgment. My daughter spoke again, her voice lower, firmer. "How long do you think you can keep this up? You can't force the truth to kneel, and when it stands, every lie you built your law on will collapse." Victor gritted his teeth, his face tightening. I caught the flicker in his eyes, a split between fury and fear. He was used to people bowing their heads, staying silent, letting him judge at will. But Naomi was staring down his barrel and saying what no one had ever dared say. A short laugh escaped Victor's mouth, but it came out stripped of the arrogance it once held. "You've got nerve. But nerves snap when they meet a bullet. You think you're different? The rule here is simple. I win, you lose." Naomi lowered her voice, slow and deliberate. "No, you're wrong. The law here is not you. It never was. You're just a man clinging to a light-colored suit. Fool yourself into thinking you matter." That line hit Victor like a hammer to the face. He inhaled sharply, gripping the gun tighter. I saw veins bulging in his neck, his breathing ragged. The barrel remained locked on Naomi, but it was clear. He hadn't expected to be struck right at the heart of his illusion, costume of power. Around us, a murmur stirred, faint whispers rippling through the crowd. I caught the eye of an older woman. She shook her head, her lips pressed tight as if holding back fury. Maybe this wasn't the first time they had seen him act. Maybe it was just the first time someone dared to fight back. Victor whipped around to face the crowd and shouted, "What are you all staring at?" This is how we keep order. No one is allowed to destroy the values of this place. But his voice came out hoarse, lacking the certainty it usually carried. Naomi didn't blink. She kept her eyes on him, her gaze like a mirror reflecting his unease. "You really want to take it this far? Then you'll pay for it. Not with a bullet, but with the name you've been clinging to all this time." I saw Victor's hand trembling more visibly now. He drew in a deep breath, but the gun remained aimed. He growled, "I told you, I am the law. There are no exceptions here." In that moment, I understood he had gone too far, past a line he thought he could control, and Naomi, with a calm so cold it cut, had pulled him into a place he could never come back from. Victor pressed the gun barrel even closer, close enough for me to feel the chill against my skin. With his other hand, he clicked on the radio and spoke loudly, "Prep the transport. I've got a disruptor in custody." The dry, hollow sound echoed, making the atmosphere even heavier. I noticed a few glances from a distance quickly retreat, as if standing nearby alone might pull them into the mess. Naomi didn't move. My daughter stood tall, her posture firm, her eyes beginning to shift. The innocence she usually carried was gone, placed by a hardened stare, cold, seasoned, like someone who'd faced death on the battlefield. I had never seen her like that before, but I understood. This was true Victor stared straight at Naomi, curling his lip into a mocking grin. "That look won't save you. I am powerful here, and no one takes that from me." He glanced at me, eyes cutting deep into pride. "See this? Your daughter will be the example this community remembers. Everyone will submit." Naomi tilted her head slightly, her eyes locked on the barrel. Her voice came steady, but sharp. "Are you sure you're in control, Victor? Look around. They don't fear you. Fear has never been real power." The crowd stirred, a few whispers rising, some slipping phones back into their pockets as if Naomi had shaken them from a spell. Victor scowled, his gun hand trembling harder, but he still barked out, "Shut up! You don't get to speak here. Everyone accepted me as the law, and I will not let some brown-skinned girl tear that down." I felt my blood rush to my head, but Naomi raised a hand, stopping me before I could step forward. She looked Victor dead in the eye, her stare sharp as a spear. "You call that an order? An order built on contempt and threat, where people stay quiet out of fear, not respect? That's not the law. That's disgraceful." Her words rang out, and several people gripped the edges of their seat. A few nodded subtly, though no one dared stand. I knew in in that moment, Naomi was pushing Victor toward the edge of the line he'd drawn for him. Victor roared, squeezing the trigger so tightly his finger turned pale. "Don't test me. One shot, and this ends. Can't save yourself." He hit the radio again, shouting, "Now! I'm not wasting time on this trash." Naomi let out a small smile, cold, sharp. "You think I'm trash? You look at me and see someone weak, but you'll soon realize you've aimed your gun at the wrong person." Her words sent a chill down my spine. Not from the threat, from Naomi's confidence, a kind of confidence few possess while staring down the barrel of a gun. Her eyes had changed completely, from steady resolve to something steely, like a warrior who had trained the elite. Victor flinched slightly, stepping back half a pace, but the gun stayed raised. "You think you're somebody? Just a girl talking back to me? I will crush you so this entire neighborhood remembers. Victor Hale is never humiliated." Naomi stepped forward slightly, her eyes unblinking. "No, Victor, you just humiliated yourself. What are you trying to prove with a gun? Someone truly strong doesn't need to threaten with cold steel." The crowd began to stir louder now, and a few shouts of "That's enough" broke through, but still felt scattered. The long-held silence cracked, replaced by doubt. People were beginning to look at Victor differently, not as the absolute authority, but as a man unraveling, blinded by power. Victor grimaced, his eyes bloodshot. He shouted, "Everyone shut up. No one has the right to interfere. This is my law, and anyone who challenges it will pay." But the more he yelled, the more his desperation showed, and Naomi saw it clearly. My daughter responded without flinching. "You could pull that trigger right now, but remember, the bullet won't kill the truth. It will only expose you as a coward hiding your weakness beneath that light-colored suit." I saw Victor free, his eyes darting, then returning to Naomi with visible confusion. The gun remained raised, but the certainty in his stance had vanished. In that moment, I knew the tension had reached its peak. One more move, and the mask of authority he wore would fall. Murmurs spread around the lake, whispers tangled with panic. A woman clutched her husband's arm and whispered, "Oh God, is he really going to shoot?" No one stepped forward, but the unrest had replaced the tight-lipped fear from before. My chest rose and fell, heart pounding with a heavy, echoing rhythm like war drums in my head. Every instinct screamed that something was about to erupt, one moment that could change everything. Victor still held the gun, eyes burning, but his palms had started to sweat, drops running down and stripping away his usual composure. Naomi didn't back down. She stepped another half-step forward, her eyes blazing like fire. She stared directly at Victor, each word cold as ice. "You say you are the law, but since when does the law need a gun to be believed?" Victor gritted his teeth, voice growling low. "You're playing with fire. Don't test me, girl." He turned toward the crowd, seeking support, but the faces looked down, or buried themselves in phone screens. No one stood with him. Naomi spoke again, calm but cutting. "Look at them, Victor. They're not with you. They only fear you, and fear isn't power. It's just a shadow. Someone truly strong doesn't need to scream." Her words sliced through the mask Victor had worn. I saw him falter, his eyes darting again, his mouth moving without finding a reply. The gun still pointed forward, but his hand was shaking harder. The murmuring grew again, now with audible frustration. A man muttered, "He's lost control." Another added with a click of the tongue, "This isn't protecting the community. This is threatening lives." Victor spun around and shouted over everything, "Shut up. The only reason I haven't pulled the trigger is because I'm giving you a chance to understand what discipline looks like." But his voice cracked, no longer firm. Every word sounded like a final, desperate attempt to cling to the illusion of control. Naomi remained still, face cold and composed. She lowered her voice. Each word struck the air with weight. "You've already gone too far. You don't realize you've started a fight you will never win." In that moment, I clenched my fist, knowing the tension had reached its absolute. The rage in me boiled past the point of silence. No one believed Victor was the symbol of order anymore, and he could feel that too. I took a deep breath, my heart still pounding, and inside me rose a certainty. The storm Naomi was about to unleash would change everything. Naomi stepped forward, the motion so sharp and deliberate that several people held their breath. My daughter raised her chin, eyes blazing, and her voice rang out like steel. "You just made the biggest mistake of your life. I'm not a victim. I'm a Navy SEAL trainer." Tension hanging in the air suddenly exploded. A wave of murmurs surged through the crowd, jaws dropping open. One resident whispered with a trembling voice, "No way. SEAL trainer?" A man stepped back, dropping his phone onto the brick path. The sharp clack of plastic hitting stone carried carried more impact than Naomi's word. It marked the moment truth began to turn the tide. Victor froze, the smirk on his face turning stiff. The barrel of the gun dipped slightly before he braced himself, trying to mask the shake in his stance. You think I believe some wild story like that? This little brown girl thinks she can scare me with a few tough words? He shouted, but his voice cracked, no longer solid. Naomi didn't answer immediately. She drew a deep breath, eyes locked on Victor, then slowly raised her left hand, pointing to the calluses hardened on her palm, skin darkened by thousands of hours of brutal training. Look closely. Do you know where these come from? Not from sitting in a chair or wearing a polished suit. They come from the training ground, from real weapons, from a level of discipline people like you wouldn't survive for a single day. The crowd fell silent. Someone swallowed hard. A few eyes now glinted with awe. I heard the quiet murmur ripple through. If that's true, then he picked the wrong person to mess with. Victor tried to hold on to his aggression. He growled, "You think I care about your titles? This is my neighborhood, not your battlefield." But his finger on the trigger was shaking. Naomi stepped another half step forward, her voice ice cold. "Do you know what SEALs are trained for? They're trained to face death without fear, and I'm the one who turns ordinary recruits into warriors who never kneel. Do you really believe someone like you can break me?" Her words sliced through the air like a blade. I heard the wind whip across the lake, mingling with the sharp intakes of breath from those nearby. Face turned from red to pale, like he'd been stripped bare in front of everyone. A woman nearby murmured, hand over her mouth, "I can't believe it. A SEAL trainer. Right here." Her husband dragged their chairs back, his expression a mix of shock and fear. The sight only made Victor lose more footing. He screamed, trying to reclaim control. "Don't believe her! It's a trick to turn you all against me. You're being played." But his voice no longer carried weight. The residents were starting to look at him differently, not with submission, but with suspicion. Naomi's tone remained calm. "You say I'm lying? You think I need to prove anything to you? The truth reveals itself. You can keep pointing that gun, but their eyes are already telling the story. You lost the moments began." Victor gripped the gun tighter, but it was clear he was losing control. The tremble in his hand, the chaos flickering in his eyes. Everything betrayed the panic he was desperately trying to hide. Some residents began raising their phones higher, recording in close up, as if determined to capture every second. I saw Victor glance around and realized the support was no longer his. Faces that once stayed silent now reflected the truth back at him like mirrors, and I knew the wall of false authority he had spent years building had just been punched through by Naomi. My daughter tilted her head, voice steady and sharp. "You call yourself the law, but today you pointed your gun at the wrong person." Victor's face blanched, his skin turning a cold, grayish tone he couldn't mask. Still, clinging to the thin shell of his crumbling dominance, he shouted, his voice raspy with arrogance, "Don't try to scare me! You people don't know shit about SEALs!" His scream echoed across the lake, but instead of asserting power, it sounded like a man drowning in desperation. The crowd fell quiet, then erupted into more murmurs, a ripple breaking loose. They looked at each other, exchanging stunned glances, and many began angling their phones for a better view. Naomi didn't move. Her face stayed calm as still water, her eyes flashing with an unfamiliar steel. Her voice dropped, slow and cutting, each word carved into Victor's hearing. "Want to test it? I've trained soldiers you've only seen on TV." The words dropped into the crowd like a bomb. Jaws dropped. Someone nearly cursed out loud. A woman gasped with a hand over her mouth. A middle-aged man whispered from the back, voice trembling, "She trains SEALs?" God, he pointed a gun at the wrong person. I could see the shift on Victor's face. He was still trying to hold on to his intimidation, but his facial muscles twitched and his eyes lost focus. The hand holding the gun trembled more clearly now. The barrel wavered, no longer locked on Naomi but drifted. Naomi stepped forward again, just enough for the crowd to see that she felt no fear. Her voice rang out clear, cold as a blade. "You think that gun makes you important? That light-colored suit makes you the law? I've watched men collapse on the training field, unable to survive the physical trial, and I turned them into warriors. And you think someone like you can make me afraid?" The murmurs had shifted into open reaction. An elderly woman shook her head and said to the person beside her, "She's telling the truth. Only someone who's been through real training can speak that." The man next to her nodded slowly, eyes moving from Naomi to Victor with clear. Victor swallowed hard, then tried to claw his way back with the same tired word. "You might fool a few of them, but you're not fooling me. You're nothing. You'll never stand on my level." Naomi didn't respond with anger, but with calm. She tilted her head slightly, her gaze drilling straight into Victor. You're afraid. Ever since I spoke the truth, you've no longer been the one in control here. You can pull the trigger, but you know exactly what will happen after. Every person recording right now will prove you weren't upholding the law. You were trying to kill a United States Special Forces trainer. A heavy silence settled over everything, broken only by the wind brushing across the lake and the faint clicks of phone cameras. I saw real confusion in Victor's eyes, his gaze darting, his mouth opening and closing without finding a single word to push back. Naomi didn't give him time. She pressed further. You want to test me? You'll be the first fall. And when that happens, it won't just be you who loses everything. The name Victor Hale will become a stain on this entire neighborhood. Victor stepped back half a pace, striking the brick walkway with a loud thud, a sound that landed like a signal of collapse. He looked around, saw the sea of raised phones, saw the faces that once stayed silent now filled with doubt and disdain. The breaking point was hit. No one believed Victor held absolute power anymore. Naomi had flipped the entire board with a single sentence, and I knew then the power struggle had just shifted into something entirely new. Victor stepped back the scrape of his leather shoes against the brick ground echoing with the tremble in his step. His hand was still on the trigger, but it was visibly shaking, and his voice had lost all firmness, breaking apart with every word. The contrast before me couldn't be clearer. A man in a light-colored suit who once shouted that he was the law now stood unsteady, his eyes darting in panic. Meanwhile, Naomi, the girl he had once dismissed as weak, stood tall, her eyes cold as blades cutting through his facade. I didn't need to say a word to know the crowd around the lake had seen it too. The balance of power had shifted. Naomi didn't lower her voice. She took another half step forward and spoke firm clarity. You have two choices. 1. Lower the gun and end this farce in front of everyone. 2. Keep holding it and let the world watch you exposed as a coward hiding behind borrowed power. Victor's lips moved, eyes scanning for support, but instead of agreement, all he found were disappointed faces, few shaking heads, and a sea of raised phones capturing every moment. He clenched his teeth, but the fear in his eyes was now unmistakable. I saw several residents rise from their benches whispering to each other, faces burning with quiet anger. A man muttered under his breath, just loud enough to catch, "All these years," and finally, someone had the guts say it to his. The words struck like a match in an already charged atmosphere. Victor roared, but the sound was weak. "All of you, shut up! I'm still in charge here." No one can change that he raised the gun higher, as if the gesture alone could salvage what remained of his authority. But in that exact moment, his desperation showed more clearly than ever. Naomi stared him down, her voice eerily calm. You have no authority left. All you have is that gun in your hand, and it's the very thing revealing who you really are. Real strength doesn't need a weapon to be seen. A few gasps rippled through the crowd, followed by deep, weary sigh. I heard a woman whisper, "She's the protector here, not him." That quiet truth crept through the group like a current, and Victor clenched his jaw, sweat beading on his forehead. He suddenly turned to me, shouting, "You proud of this? Letting your daughter humiliate me in front of everyone? I'll make your whole family pay for this." But the threat landed with no weight. I stood still, didn't respond. The contrast between us said everything that needed saying. Naomi pushed forward once more, her voice cutting clean. "You've already lost, Victor. You can scream. You can point that gun, but you're no longer in control. The community you used to dominate now sees straight through you." A silence hung in the air, until a single clap rang out from the back, then another, then a few more. It wasn't loud, but it echoed, breaking apart the silence Victor had imposed for so long. Victor's face drained of color. He stumbled another step back, the gun in his hand trembling so hard it dropped toward the brick. He tried to speak, but it came out like a choked sob. "Stop it! All of you, stop clapping! Now!" Naomi looked at him, her eyes sharp as fire. "You see it now, don't you, Victor? The game has flipped. You're no longer the law. You're just a panicked man standing in front of the truth, and the truth never bows." I could feel the shift in the air, the peak of tension giving way to a surge of unity. Victor was no longer the enforcer. He was just a shadow shrinking beneath the light Naomi had ignited. Naomi kept her eyes cold, her voice slicing through the silence like a blade. "You have two choices, Victor. Lower your gun right now, or let everyone here witness you fall on this very ground." Her words landed like an axe, splitting the pressure wide open. A beat of silence followed, then scattered applause rang out from the back. First, just a few hands, then more joined in. The clapping grew louder, mingled with soft whistles, swelling into a wave of momentum that turned the energy decisively toward us. I looked around and saw the once avoiding faces now held high, the eyes that once dropped now shining with support. A middle-aged man called out, "She's right, that's enough, Victor. We don't want to live in fear anymore." His words added fuel to the crowd, and the applause spread, echoing around the lake like thunder. Victor staggered, the gun still in his hand, but the barrel now pointed low, as if the resistance itself had pushed him to the edge. His face flushed, sweat glistening on his forehead. He tried to yell, but the words came out weak. "Stop it! You don't know what you're doing. I'm the one keeping order." But no one listened anymore. The clapping drowned him out, soft cheers rising from small group. An older woman spoke clearly, "We've had enough. You're not the law. You're just fear in a light-colored suit." Naomi seized the moment, stepping another half-step forward, her voice firm. "Do you hear them, Victor? They're not with you anymore. All you have left is that gun in your hand, and it won't save you from the truth." Victor looked around, panic flaring in his eyes, like a man on the edge of losing everything. The crowd stood taller with each beat of applause, every clap striking like a hammer on the mask of power he had once worn. I saw his finger tighten on the trigger, but his hand shook so violently it carried no threat. In that moment, I knew the balance had truly shifted. The man who once called himself the law now stood on the edge of collapse, while my daughter, with nothing but conviction and courage, had led an entire community out of silence. News began to leak from within the crowd. A man's voice rose from the back, not loud, clear enough to silence the group. He used to be a cop, got fired for abusing civilians. The HOA board knew, but they still brought him back as security. The words hit like a weight dropped into a still lake, sending ripples through the entire crowd. I looked around and saw the residents' expressions shift instantly. Those who had merely watched began whispering louder, some repeating the sentence just to make sure the person next to them heard it. The information spread like wildfire, igniting through the circle of people in a matter of heart. Victor froze, his lips moving without sound. His face shifted color, flushed red to pale, then to a sickly shade of gray. He tried to shout over the truth that had just been laid bare, but his voice caught in his throat, no longer heavy enough. Naomi stood tall, her voice ice cold. "So now it's clear, you're not a protector, and you're certainly not a representative of the law. You're a man kicked off the force for violence, shielded by a rotten board to be used as a weapon against the very people who live here." The crowd erupted in loud murmur. People began piecing together their own memory. A middle-aged woman clutched her purse tightly and said clearly, "My son got harassed by him for riding his bikes the gate. I filed a complaint, but the HOA ignored it." A man added angrily, "My family got fined for no reason. They made us pay extra for some nonsense. Now it makes sense." One accusation followed another, each one landing like a hammer. The dark picture came together right there on the spot. The residents realized they had been deceived for years, and the fear that once silenced them turned into fury. Victor shook his head, shouting hoarsely, "It's all lies. None of this can be proven. I did it for this neighborhood's safety." But every word he uttered only made the deception clearer. Each attempt at defense brought another outcry from the crowd. An elderly man leaned on his cane, his voice trembling but firm. "I once saw him drag a young black boy off the grass just for laughing too loud. I stayed quiet because I was afraid. But today, no one's afraid anymore." Applause followed, louder than before, shattering Victor's last grasp on control. Naomi stepped forward again, eyes locked on the man who was now visibly staggering. "Did you think the truth could stay buried forever? You used security as a cover for violence, that shiny suit as a costume for deception. But now it's the people here calling you out. You've lost your place." Victor's eyes flared, raising his gun with trembling hands like a man on the brink. But the weapon no longer held power. No one flinched. The eyes fixed on him were filled not with fear, but with... He screamed one last time, "I'm still the keeper of the law!" A voice rang out from the crowd in reply, strong and undeniable. "No! You're a traitor to the law." In that moment, I knew the truth had shattered the shell of his authority, and for the first time, Victor Hale was forced to face what he never imagined. The entire community was standing with us. An elderly woman in the crowd burst into tears, her voice trembling but echoing through the open air. "My son had his arm broken by him, and the HOA gave him an award." That sound sliced through the already tense atmosphere like a blade. Her choked sob, mingling with the rising mutters of outrage, sent the crowd reeling as if waking from a nightmare that had lasted for years. Victor flinched, his eyes darting wildly, searching for something to hold on to. But the accusations kept coming, faster and fiercer. A man growled, "My family was fined because we let the American flag fly too long. Now I see. It was all a power game. A young man pushed forward. He stopped me at the gate just because I was wearing an old hoodie. I still remember the way he looked at me, like I didn't belong here. Naomi didn't blink. She stared straight at me, her eyes steely and unwavering. Her voice rang out, crisp and firm. You didn't just fake the law. You are the disgrace of it. Crowd erupted with a unified, "That's right," as if on instinct. A woman clutched her young daughter, her voice sharp. We've stayed silent too long. He never protected anyone. He ruled through fear. The support grew louder, a mix of applause and angry shouts, sending Victor into a daze. I saw his hand trembling uncontrollably, the barrel of his gun drifting, no longer held steady. He tried to shout over the noise, but his voice cracked apart. "Shut up! You've all been fooled by this girl. I kept this place safe. I'm the reason this community is peaceful." A bitter laugh broke out from an older man. "Safe? You turned this place into a prison." The words were followed by a round of thunderous applause, more powerful than any counter-argument. Naomi stepped forward half a pace, never breaking eye contact. "You think you are the law, but the law doesn't need a gun to exist. Real law is built on justice and trust, two things you've never possessed." Victor's face flushed, sweat rolling down his cheek. He turned to the crowd, shouting like a man unraveling, "Without me, there would be no order here. I'm the reason this HOA even worked." But his voice shattered, devoid of force. A middle-aged woman spoke up, not with trembling words, but with firm resolve. "We don't need someone like you to survive. We need truth, and today, we finally have it." I looked around and saw faces transformed. There was anger, there was relief, but above all, there was awakening. People began to move closer together, no longer shrinking away. They didn't look at Victor with fear anymore, but with contempt, tinged with pity. Victor slowly backed away, his steps unsteady, the gun in his hand suddenly weighing 100 pounds. He looked at Naomi, then at the crowd, his mouth open but unable to form a word with any weight. Naomi kept her tone calm, delivering one final blow. "You used the HOA to serve yourself, but now you'll face the consequences. You can't hide anymore." In that moment, truth was no longer a whisper in the shadows. It had risen in broad daylight, right here in this neighborhood, and turned Victor from the ruler into a fraud laid bare. Everything happened in a split second. Naomi shifted her weight, flicked her wrist in one swift motion I couldn't even fully see. The gun flew from Victor's trembling hand, clattering against the brick path with the heavy sound of metal. Before he could react, Naomi had locked his arm, twisted it hard, and slammed him straight into the grass. The dry thud of his body hitting the ground made the crowd fall silent for a heartbeat, then explode in cheers. Victor howled like a trapped animal. He thrashed wildly, but Naomi's hand pinned his behind his back, locking every joint in place. Each attempt to resist only added to his pain, his face contorting, sweat pouring down in streams. He screamed hoarsely, "Let me go! I am the law. You'll all pay for humiliating me." But the words were just empty shrieks now, drowned beneath the rising roar of the crowd. The sight of Victor sprawled in the grass, his once pristine, light-colored suit stained with dirt, pinned effortlessly beneath Naomi, was captured by dozens of phones in every direction. Screens lit up across the scene. I knew within hours this moment would flood social media, and every lie he'd ever told would have nowhere left to hide. Naomi said little. She held the lock steady, eyes fixed on the man beneath her. Her voice rang out, clear and unwavering. "You called yourself the law. Today you're going to learn that real law is never in the hands of a coward." The crowd erupted into applause. A man shouted, "That's right, he deserves this." The cheers blended into a sweeping wave, forcing Victor deeper into his collapse. I saw residents step closer, their eyes no longer cautious but blazing with long-buried fury. Victor kept flailing, but Naomi held him down. A middle-aged woman shouted at him, "Years of torment, and now you finally get a taste of humiliation." An elderly man leaned on his cane, his voice trembling but firm. "You were never cured. You were fear, and we're not afraid anymore." Camera shutters clicked non-stop. Every twitch of Victor's face, every flicker of panic and shame was recorded. He shouted, his voice broken, "I'll sue. I'll get revenge on all of you." But his threats vanished into the roar of a united crowd. Naomi leaned in close to his ear, speaking just loud enough for those nearby to hear. "You can scream all you want, but your voice doesn't carry weight anymore. Everyone's seen your true faith." I looked around and saw people who had once kept their heads down now standing tall, eyes lit with a long-awaited satisfaction. A middle-aged man whispered, "We've waited for this day far too long." A teenager laughed aloud. "He's got nothing left but that filthy suit." Victor sagged, still thrashing weakly, his growls sounding more like muffled sob. I knew this wasn't just Naomi's victory. It was the moment the entire community was free. A man who once stood towering above them all had now been brought to his knees before everyone everyone's eye. Naomi pressed harder, locking him still, then raised her head to face the crowd. He called himself the law, but the truth is, we are the ones who create the law. No one has the right to trample others under the guise of fake power. Applause erupted again, louder and longer than ever before. I knew from that moment on, Victor Hale had been officially taken down, and not by a bullet, but by the hand of the very girl he had dared to underestimate. Victor lay face down in the grass, gasping for breath, sweat matting his hair to his forehead. His hand, pinned tightly behind his back by Naomi, twitched with every useless struggle, only adding to his pain. He no longer roared or barked threat. His voice had collapsed into desperate, stammering sob. "Please, stop!" Naomi didn't take her eyes off the man pinned beneath her. She lowered her voice, calm but clear enough for all to hear. "The real law. You're about to learn it." The words dropped like a hammer, silencing the crowd for a brief second before they exploded again into cheers, claps, and a rising wave of shout. I saw phones still raised high, recording every second of Victor, his once pristine, light-colored suit now stained with mud, his face twisted in shame. Everything he once flaunted, everything he used to intimidate, had become a symbol of disgrace. A man shouted, "Karma's real. All those years he tormented us. Now it's his turn." A woman answered, "Justice may be slow, but when it comes, it never misses." Victor tried to speak again, but broken sobs tangled his words. Naomi didn't flinch, her grip steady, every move precise, like she'd rehearsed this moment 1,000 times. There was no tremble in her face, only cold, unshakable resolve. I stood close by, heart swelling with a mixed pride and relief. Naomi had shown the entire neighborhood fear no longer had a place here, that truth and courage were what truly brought down the fraud. For the first time in years, this community clapped out loud, openly admitting they no longer bowed their head. A teenager raised his phone for a close-up, laughing, "This is going viral, and he'll never show his face again." The crowd echoed with agreement, a collective wave of long-awaited satisfaction. Naomi looked around, her gaze razor-sharp. She didn't need to say another word. This image was the final blow. The entire community had seen it. The entire community had united. And Victor Hale, the man who once declared himself the law, was now nothing more than a stripped-down failure under broad daylight. CTA, do you think someone like Victor deserves to be publicly humiliated in front of the entire community? Drop your thoughts in the comment. In just one night, the video capturing Naomi taking down Victor spread across every social media platform. Short clips showing him screaming, begging, then being pinned to the grass in his light-colored suit quickly became a symbol of reckoning. Press jumped in immediately, bold headlines flooding the feeds, fake HOA cop exposed by residents, from power to public shame in minutes. The online community shared it at lightning speed, accompanied by thousands of furious and gleeful comments. The HOA board, which had long stood silently behind Victor, now had no choice but to face the fallout. They were bombarded with questions at emergency meetings, each member forced to confront their complicity. A storm of demands rained down. Who allowed a man fired from the police force to carry a gun in this neighborhood? Why were years of complaints buried? Camera flashed, reporters pointed questions, and mounting pressure from residents turned them into flustered figures with nowhere left to hide. This time, the residents did not stay silent. Petitions flew. Hundreds of signatures were gathered in a single afternoon, demanding the immediate disbandment of the fake security team that had been nothing more than a shield for Victor's abuses. Many spoke out bluntly. "We pay fees to feel safe, not to be psychologically terrorized." The petition was sent to the local government, and the overwhelming consensus was enough to force the HOA into submission. Meanwhile, Victor was fired on the spot. The layers of protection once built around him collapsed his old records were unearthed, and every charge and misconduct from his past were brought to light by the media. He was formally charged by police with weaponized threats, falsifying records, and abuse of authority. His haggard image in an inmate jumpsuit appeared on the evening news, a stark contrast to the arrogant figure who once strutted through the neighborhood. Victor's reputation was beyond saving. Those who once shook his hand or backed him now turned their back, treating him like a stain that had to be scrubbed away. Even residents who had previously stayed silent now openly spat his name. Victor Hale, once a symbol of unchecked power, had become a curse. Naomi didn't need to say much after that. She simply walked through the neighborhood, calm-eyed and steady, as if the suffocating confrontation had never happened. But I could see the respect in every gaze that followed her. They didn't just see a young woman. They saw someone who had lit a fire of courage within the entire community. I watched quietly, a wave of pride and relief rising rising in my chest. Final blow wasn't a fist, nor a bullet. It was the truth dragged into the light, and that light had burned away every trace of the false authority Victor once clung to. I looked at Naomi, eyes misted, my voice catching in a flood of emotion. You turned fear into justice. People will remember this day. What unfolded wasn't merely a showdown between a man with a gun and a seemingly vulnerable girl. It was the downfall of a fabricated power that had weighed down an entire community for years. Naomi simply smiled, a calm smile, as if everything that had just happened wasn't a battle, but merely something that needed to be done. Her voice rang out gently, but every word was sharp as a blade. That's the price he paid for pointing a gun at the wrong person. The crowd around her still buzzed. Many stepped closer, wanting to get a better look at Naomi, to see for themselves the face that had defied and taken down Victor Hale right in front of a gun barrel. I saw a few women clasp each other's hand, their eyes welling with tears. One whispered, "She did what all of us wished for but never dared." The murmuring gradually turned into open voices. An elderly resident raised his voice, no longer trembling. "We've been silent for too long. Starting today, we will no longer allow anyone to use the HOA to impose fear on us." That declaration was met with a thunderous round of applause, stronger than any before it. Naomi stepped back, leaving Victor sprawled on the ground, his body smeared with grass and mud. He had no strength left to resist, his bloodshot eyes burning with humiliation and despair. Every camera click from the residents, every scornful glance thrown his way, landed like a hammer blow on the last door of his illusion of power. I looked up, scanning the scene, and saw this community transforming in real time. Faces once accustomed to lowering their gaze, to looking away, now slowly lift. Eyes that once held fear now flashed with resolve. This wasn't just Naomi's victory. It was the awakening of an entire community that had long been suppressed. A man stepped forward, his voice hoarse but resolute. "We need to bring this to the authorities. We can't let Victor and the board keep ruling over us like this." The crowd responded with a chorus of agreement. I saw dozens of nods, a visible consensus in every movement. Naomi turned to me, her eyes calm, as if to say everything was just beginning. I understood then, the real fight didn't end with Victor on the ground. It would continue to expose the entire system that had enabled him. And now that the community had found its voice, no wall was thick enough to hide the truth. Victor was pulled to his feet, his legs trembling as if they could no longer hold him, his head down, unable to meet anyone's eye. Shouts of anger came from all sides, each word slicing into the last fragments of his shattered pride. He was no longer the law of this neighborhood, but a disgrace, a name now synonymous with shame. I gently placed a hand on Naomi's shoulder, overwhelmed with indescribable pride. She had turned the most desperate moment into undeniable proof justice never disappeared. It merely waits for someone brave enough to call its name, and today, Naomi had called it in front of everyone. At the end of this story, looking back at everything that happened, I realized we had gone through a journey no one in this community could have anticipated. From what seemed like a peaceful morning by the lake, in just moments, everything turned into a breathless confrontation between Victor Hale, a man cloaked in counterfeit authority, and my daughter, Naomi Carter. In those moments, I witnessed how someone could use the guise of community protection to spread fear, only to be stripped bare by a truth he could never deny. When Victor pointed his gun at Naomi, the entire neighborhood seemed to hold its breath. I heard my own heart pounding, felt a wave of helplessness wash over me, and in that instant, I understood the cruelty of those who abuse power. They don't need reason, only the fear of others. But Naomi, with eyes sharp as steel, refused to bow. She stepped forward and revealed her true identity, a Navy SEAL trainer. That declaration didn't just dismantle Victor's fake authority, it was a wake-up call for a community long subdued by fear. I still remember the shock rippling through the crowd when Naomi spoke. People looked at one another, whispered, then slowly shifted their gaze from fearing Victor to admiring my daughter. False power, built on silence and submission, collapses instantly when confronted by the truth. Victor trembled, his voice faltered, the barrel of his gun wavered, and in that moment, the balance of power reversed completely. When the dirty truth about Vic's past came to light, the community erupted. It turned out he had been fired from the police force for brutality, yet the HOA board had shielded him, giving him the security cover to continue oppressing residents. Years of suppressed grievances poured out, from families fined unfairly to children once threatened. Every story retold was another nail in the coffin of Victor's authority. The moment Naomi disarmed him and threw him to the grass, cheers erupted around us, and I saw the entire community awaken. The image of a man who once sat atop everyone else, now pinned down in his bright suit, writhing in disgrace, stood as undeniable proof that the truth cannot stay hidden forever. That video went viral, the press got involved, and within days, the entire system that protected him crumbled. The HOA board board was grilled, forced to disband their sham security, and Vic faced criminal charges and the scorn of an entire society. When I looked at Naomi, I said through a rush of emotion, "You turned fear into justice. People will remember this day." And she simply smiled, responding with a calmness that sent chills. That's the price he paid for pointing a gun at the wrong person. That smile wasn't triumphant. It was the expression of someone who knew that justice had finally found its place. What lingers most isn't the downfall of Victor, but the awakening of the community. For years, people bowed their heads to the HOA, allowing someone like Victor to become the law. They stayed silent out of fear, and that silence fed his counterfeit authority. But when Naomi stood up and the truth came to light, the very community found its voice again, found its unity. This story reminds me that justice doesn't come from those who scream about power, but from ordinary people who dare to confront injustice. Naomi, in the moment when a gun was pointed at her, didn't choose to cower. She chose to stare it down, and that courage lit up the truth, turning fear into strength. The lesson here is crystal clear. First, false authority may last for years, but it's always built on fear. Once fear is broken, that power collapses faster than anything else. Second, a strong community isn't one ruled by a single voice, but one where every individual dares to speak. Silence may shield us for a moment, but over time, it becomes the rope tightens around our freedom. I also learned that justice never disappears. It simply waits for someone brave enough to call its name. Naomi did that, not through brute force, through confidence, truth, and the discipline forged in the military. And when justice shows up, it doesn't just save one person, it liberates an entire community. The image of Victor Hale crumpled on the ground will remain etched in this neighborhood's memory. It's a reminder that no matter how arrogant a tyrant may be, he will eventually pay the price. In contrast, the image of Naomi standing tall, eyes cold and clear, will inspire others, proof that no one is powerless if they're willing to face truth. I believe anyone who witnessed this story, whether in person or through a screen, now carries a message inside them. Never give silence the power to rule. Injustice only needs one challenger to begin to crack, and when one person rises, others will find the courage to follow. The story ends here, but its echoes do not. For me, it's a memory both painful and proud. For Naomi, it was just another day, because she lives with the spirit of defending justice. For the community, it was the day they stepped out of the shadows and learned how to reclaim their voice. And for anyone reading or listening, let this be your reminder. Justice doesn't lie in the hands of those who declare themselves the law. It lives in the courage of ordinary people. When someone dares to stand up, dares to stare down the barrel of injustice, the truth will be freed, and justice will find its way back.